Today we're going to talk about 4.5 battles of Trenton and Princeton. So Washington is on the run. The last thing we talked about on the previous PowerPoint was a cat and mouse game. George Washington and the Continental Army was the mouse running from the British and the German Hessians. So the British and the Hessians are in chase mode after Washington retreated at the Battle of Long Island. So they did fight a few skirmishes, a skirmish being a small battle, all ending in another U.S. retreat. So George Washington, they just keep running. Every time they run, he's trying to buy time for his soldiers to train them. In November of 1776, Washington and his army crossed the Hudson and the Delaware rivers to stay ahead of the Redcoat Army. So crossing a river with an army is not just as easy as it sounds. It's not just you walking across a bridge. It's going to be getting thousands of troops across in boats. Now, in the north, these rivers are much larger than where we live here today. These rivers are deep, currents are strong, and with it being the time of year, with it being in the winter, the water is too cold for you just to swim across. You would get hypothermia very quickly or even cramp up on the way across and not make it. So to get your army across, you'd have to use smaller boats, and you'd have to make multiple trips back and forth. And it's not just soldiers. It's also supplies, it's horses, it's cannons, artillery. All those things have to get across the river. So making it across the river is a very big deal, because for Washington, every time he got across the river, that means he had a little bit more free time. He had some breathing room between him and the British or the German Hessians, whoever may have been chasing at that time. So why is George Washington always retreating? He's trying to buy more time to train his troops. Every time he would retreat, it would give him some more downtime to where, if they're not traveling, then he could train his troops for a little bit. And he was also waiting for a time where he had an advantage. He knew that if he just lined up across from the Redcoats in a wide open field and marched up to them, that his army would get destroyed. So he's looking for an advantage. Nathan Hale is an American spy. So Washington needed information about the British forces in New York. So a young officer named Nathan Hale volunteered to go behind the British lines. Unfortunately, secret notes about the British troop movement were found in his shoes, and so he was ordered to be hung the next morning. He did say before he was hung that he does regret doing what he did. However, if basically losing just his own life helps save many other Americans, and if his country is successful because of what he did, then he is completely okay with it, that it was worth it to lose his own life in order for America to be successful. So we had the Battle of Trenton. So Christmas night, so this is the night of December 25th. So Christmas Day, that day, George Washington and his troops, that he's going to tell his troops tonight's the night. So on December 26, 1776, George Washington and his troops crossed the frozen Delaware River. You look at the picture there, it's a famous picture or painting of George Washington here. Okay, and he's, leading his troops across the Delaware River in these smaller boats. Like I said, you can't just walk across the river on a bridge. You can't, just swim across it. There's icebergs here. It's very cold. The icebergs might be a little bit misrepresented. I've never seen a river with icebergs before, but maybe that was the case. But it's just representing that the water is very cold. Okay, it's a winter day, Christmas time. There is snow, and it does snow that night when it happens. So this is the middle of the night. So about 11 p.m., George Washington and his troops start crossing the river. Now, like I said, they got to get horses across. They got to get artillery, cannons. They got to get all their supplies across the river. And so now they've been crossing the river running from the British or the German Hessians. This time, they are going back across the river to the same side as the Hessians. And so now they're in attack mode. So they've been in run mode all this time, and now they're in attack mode. So they're going to attack the nearby town of Trenton, New Jersey. Now, I ask, why now? George Washington has been on the run all this time. It's been the cat and mouse game, and now all of a sudden the mouse is turning back around and attacking the cat. Why? Two main reasons. One, Washington was tired of running. Okay, he knew that if he kept running, that the situation would never get better. And two, many of his soldiers' contracts they ended on January 1st. So this is the night of January 25th, and so there's just a couple more days before the year is over with. And January 1st, many of his soldiers could go home and not ever return. And he has been training some of these soldiers for weeks now, and he wants to be able to utilize them in a fight or in a battle before they go home. So he said, let's do it now. So he's going to cross the Delaware River starting around 11 p.m. And he's going to reach the town of Trenton, which is not far on the other side of the river, maybe 5-10 miles away. They're going to reach it the next morning around 8 a.m. Now, Washington, it's a struggle to make it across the Delaware River. They start at 11 p.m. They don't make it across until really about 5 o'clock the next morning is when they have everyone across. So it's going to take almost all night. The reason for that is a snowstorm blew in. Okay, it started snowing. The wind was blowing. It was very cold. And remember, it's dark. And they're trying to cross this dangerous river. And so they're going to get across at 5 o'clock the next morning. And then they have to march to Trenton. Remember, many of his soldiers, do not have the proper clothing. Some of them do not have boots or shoes, and there they are marching in the snow. So it's tough. It's miserable. But there were times where Washington thought, it took us too long to get across the river. Maybe we should pull back. But he decides, no, I got to keep going. And they reached the town of Trenton at 8 a.m. the next day, and which is still early. Not as early as he would have liked, but he gets there at 8 a.m. and he's going to start a battle with the German Hessians right there in the town of Trenton. And the commander of the Hessian army, he's asleep and wakes up to gunfire and quickly gets clothed and goes down to command his soldiers. And remember, these German Hessians, they are rented soldiers from Germany. So King George III is going to pay the government of Germany to rent these soldiers. And so these German Hessians, they don't have a lot to fight for other than a paycheck. And so once the German Hessian, their commander, the one that wakes up to gunfire, he's going to later get shot or is going to end up later dying from this battle. And once the Hessian commander is shot and eventually dies, the German Hessians don't have a lot to fight for. And so they're going to end up surrendering. About 1,000 of the troops are going to end up surrendering because they say this, it's not worth losing their life over because they're fighting for a paycheck. They're not fighting for freedom. They don't have the motivation that the Patriots have. And so George Washington is going to win the Battle of Trenton. With a surprise raid, the exhausted Continental Army managed to capture most of the German Hessians who were staying across the river in the town of Trenton. So one way to sum up the Battle of Trenton, one person said that the Hessian population of Trenton at 8 a.m. was 1,408 men and 39 officers. Hessian population at 9 a.m. was 0. Now, they did not kill them all. Okay, close to 1,000 Hessians surrendered, and so they were captured and prisoners of war, but they were not executed. Now, the Redcoats are going to hear about this, and the Redcoats are going to get very mad, okay, that Washington just basically beat the Hessians at Trenton. And so they're going to march many Redcoats to the town of Trenton under General Cornwallis. General Cornwallis is going to take it's about 6,000 to 8,000 men, Redcoats. He's going to march them from Princeton to Trenton, and he's going to try to retake Trenton, and he's going to try to capture George Washington and his troops. On January 2nd, 1777, they're in the town of Trenton. There is a small skirmish just before dark, known as the Second Battle of Trenton. And luckily, it's going to get dark before this battle finishes. And so you're going to have the Redcoat Army on one side of the creek. You're going to have George Washington and the Continental Army on the other side of the creek. And they're going to get ready to spend the night there. They're going to have their tent set up. They're going to build campfires to stay warm because it's cold outside. And under darkness, once George Washington and his soldiers build these campfires, they're going to sneak away. Now, General Cornwallis, he has no idea. He sees these campfires, across the creek from him, and he thinks that the Americans are, getting some rest, and that the next day that they would have a big battle. Well, he was completely shocked the next day when he finds out that George Washington and his army were completely gone. So little did he know that he had been fooled. General Cornwallis was fooled by Washington. Washington left the fires to burn while his army slipped behind British lines and took the back roads to Princeton, New Jersey, where he's going to attack a different British army in Princeton. George Washington realized that, if they were to stay there in Trenton, that they would not have beat Cornwallis's army the next day. He knew that they did not have an advantage, so he's going to leave and go to Princeton. So now we have the Battle of Princeton. Battle of Princeton. Washington and his troops march in the night to team up with Nathaniel Greene at Princeton. The U.S. Army are able to defeat the British Army at Princeton, while General Cornwallis wakes up the next morning in Trenton, wondering where did George Washington go. So on the Battle of Princeton, Nathaniel Greene and his men, his U.S. Men, they were already fighting, starting the Battle of Princeton that morning. And General George Washington and the Continental Army are going to show up in kind of the middle of the battle and give reinforcements to the Americans. And he's going to be on his white horse. He's going to run between the Americans and the Redcoats. And he's going to run down the line on his horse and tell the Americans to fire. And you see all this, gun smoke. And as it disappears, George Washington, some people are wondering if he's even going to survive. And he makes it out through the other end. And it's going to be inspiration to all the American soldiers there. And they're going to go on to defeat the Redcoats there in Princeton. So let's review the order of events that we've talked about so far. Okay, we have Washington cross the Delaware. That's the Christmas Day night. And he's going to win the Battle of Trenton. The German Hessians are going to surrender that night or that next morning once their commander is shot and killed. We have Cornwallis was sent to Trenton to defeat Washington. A small skirmish happens late in the evening. Okay, but then under nightfall, the British see the U.S. campfires and plan to attack the next morning. However, Washington sneaks to Princeton at night to help win the Battle of Princeton. So notice here's A. So this is the Battle of Trenton, the first time that George Washington sneaks there and captures a lot of the Hessians. And then General Cornwallis will be sent to Trenton. Then you're going to have this here, the second Battle of Trenton, which is going to be the skirmish, to where the British show up late in the evening, have a fight or a small battle, and then at night they're going to build their campfires, and then George Washington takes the back roads up to Princeton, where the next morning George Washington and Nathaniel Greene overtake the Redcoats there in Princeton. So within 10 days, George Washington is going to win two battles, the Battle of Trenton and the Battle of Princeton, all within 10 days. So he goes from playing the cat and mouse game where he's running, and now he wins two major victories there at Trenton and Princeton. Here's a video here if you would like to watch it. The link is below.